Hello everyone, Mason here. How you doing? Today it's time for my January reading wrap-up. First off, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who wished me a happy Booktube birthday and helped make that day so bloody special. I haven't had a chance to say it yet because it's the first video I've done since Dear Mason, but I really appreciate it. I love Booktube. This last year has been amazing. Not only has it been so much fun, I've made some great friends and I've been inspired. It's reawoken my love for reading and for writing, and I genuinely do value that. So yeah, thank you Booktube, you're all good uns. Anyway, I'm getting emotional, so we should probably move on. Let's get down to business. January honestly wasn't the best reading month for me. I read 4 books in total, and I had mixed feelings on pretty much all of them. Here's the first one. The Doctor by Lisa Stone. This is one of those books where the description doesn't actually match the story that we get at all. It tries to sell you on a mystery that doesn't exist by making it sound like a crucial plot point, which it's not. It doesn't even come into play until like 2/3 of the way through the novel, and when it happens, you already know the answer, so it's not a mystery. The story centres around a happily married couple named Emma and Ben. They live with their child. I can't remember his name. I could go and look it up, but I don't care that much. Their neighbours are a mysterious couple, and it seems like there's some dark stuff going on behind closed doors, but nobody could possibly guess quite how dark. Unfortunately, Emma has a friendly, if not slightly nosy personality, and she inserts herself into a very dangerous situation. It's a strange one, and really I don't know how much I can say about it without giving away any spoilers. The central premise is intriguing, maybe a little bit over the top, but still kind of fun. I've never read anything that focused on cryopreservation before, so that was a new one. As the story progresses, it's got a nice pace to it, lots of tension that slowly builds, and it definitely keeps you reading. The villain is absolutely insane and basically irredeemable in every single way. Oh, and he's got heterochromia, don't forget about that. Well, actually, you won't be able to because the author mentions it 500,000 times, at least. Here's the problem though, despite the intriguing premise, it ends up being pretty average. I read it right at the beginning of the month and it hasn't really stuck with me. It's definitely not one that I'm ever going to feel the need to go back to. To be honest, the characters are kind of one note. They never really develop past what you're presented with at the beginning of the story. Ben in particular is basically just ignored by the author for the most part, and the fact that I've forgotten what their son is called shows just how important he is to the plot. Would I recommend it? Well, that depends. If you're the sort of person that's only going to pick up one thriller in any given month, then no, don't choose this one. But if you're an avid thriller reader and you're just churning them out constantly, then yeah, it's probably worth a read. It's a bit different, it's enjoyable enough, and you'll polish it off in a day or two. There are some serious trigger warnings for domestic abuse though, so if that makes you uncomfortable, don't go anywhere near this one. The Doctor is rated F for forgettable. His and Hers by Alice Feeney. I've got mixed feelings on this one. Honestly, at this point I can't decide whether or not I like what Alice Feeney has to offer. Just like with Rock Paper Scissors, there was some stuff that I enjoyed and some stuff that I really didn't. Feeney seems to like, and be pretty good at, writing thoroughly unlikable characters, which is fine, but it does mean that I end up not rooting for anybody, and if anything, I actively hope that bad things happen to them. The story focuses on Jack and Anna, who share a troubled history. Anna is a newsreader who's sent back to Blackdown to report on a murder. Jack is the detective in charge of the case. For various reasons, they both have motive to have killed the woman, and hey presto, you've got your twisty-turny plot complete with unreliable narrators. For the most part, the perspectives jump back and forth between Jack and Anna, but you do get some chapters from the perspective of the killer, who likes to ramble on in a very villainous way about how much they love to kill. In the audiobook, Stephanie Racine and Richard Armitage take it in turns to read these chapters under a dodgy voice changer that sounds like they downloaded it for free from the Play Store. I found it laughably cheesy, and I was quite surprised when I saw other people say they found it quite creepy in their reviews. The story itself is actually okay for the most part, although I did find it quite annoying that there are chapters about Anna's past, because it makes her feel a lot more important than Jack is, whilst also being a lot less interesting. There's also some pretty dark stuff going on in those chapters, and anybody who's triggered by sexual assault should definitely bear that in mind. I think my main problem with it is that because we learn about Anna's past and not Jack's, it makes it obvious that these chapters hold the key to whatever the truth is going to be. It also means that Anna gets a lot more focus than Jack does, so it's more hers than his. As the killer strikes again and again, we get some pretty cool body finds. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are quite over the top, but still cool and gruesome even if they are elaborate and slightly unrealistic. I can't lie though, the killer's trademark is leaving something tied around the victim's tongue, and for whatever reason I just didn't buy that and found it a bit stupid. There's lots of red herrings, and unfortunately towards the end, Feeney just goes into twist overdrive. Just like with rock, paper, scissors, eventually this got too much for me and I just stopped caring. It doesn't help that one of the red herrings is a much better explanation than the actual truth, and the only reason it wasn't the case was because Feeney wanted to be cool and unpredictable, but even then, I still guessed what the truth was going to be. Once again, in terms of recommendation, I'm torn. I didn't end up liking it that much, but it seems that I'm an outlier. Lots of people thought it was absolutely great, so unfortunately, you're just going to have to use your own judgment. His and Hers is rated D for dunno. The Alibi Girl by CJ Skews. I can't lie to you, I was pretty excited to pick this one up, but I can't talk about it without mentioning Sweet Pea, which channel regulars will know was without a doubt my favourite series of last year, and is at this point one of my favourite series of all time, so needless to say I was eager to find out what else CJ Skews has to offer. The funny thing is, and the reason that I can't think of these two things separately, is that during the Sweet Pea series, Rhiannon is working on a novel called The Alibi Clock, that she later changes to The Alibi Girl. So I couldn't help but think of this as a fictional novel written by a fictional character. It was very meta and very entertaining, sort of like having an extra layer added to one of my favourite books. Right from the get-go, you can tell that this is CJ Skews, and if you've read the Sweet Pea series, the setup is familiar. First-person diary entries written by a female protagonist. The writing style is almost exactly the same, and it shares quite a lot of similarities with the humour, but in the case of The Alibi Girl, it's very toned down. It never gets anywhere near as blunt or as vulgar as Rhiannon gets. It's a strange book, slightly outlandish and definitely not your typical thriller. It centres around a woman named Joanne, whose life is entirely fake, from a name to a backstory which changes depending on who she's talking to. Is she simply an attention-seeking compulsive liar, or is there a good reason for her secrecy? This is a question that Skews keeps you asking for quite a while, but even when you know the answer, you're never quite sure what's true and what's not, because Joanne is weirdly childlike, and she's almost as unreliable as a narrator possibly could be. The cast of characters isn't huge, but the ones we do get are quite fleshed out, and they develop nicely throughout the story. There's explorations of family, friendship, a love of storytelling, the loss of innocence, how scary and overwhelming the adult world can be, and the yearning to reclaim the magic of childhood. For the most part, it's fairly unpredictable. You're never quite sure what's going to happen next. The pacing's good, and there's some pretty decent plot twists too. On the negative side, it's more than slightly unrealistic, and you definitely have to suspend your disbelief. The ending also feels quite rushed. It just comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden it's over. In my opinion, there's more positives than negatives, and I would personally recommend this, especially to someone who's curious to find out whether they like CJ Skews' writing style without diving immediately into the insanity of Sweet Pea. The Alibi Girl is rated PG for pretty good. The Pact by Sharon J. Bolton. I tell you what, when it comes to unlikable characters, this one is crammed full of them. I can only think of one person in the whole book that's even vaguely redeemable. It centres around a group of 6 friends and opens the night before they get their A-level results. After a pleasant night of heavy drinking and narcotic consumption, they decide to take part in a very dangerous, overwhelmingly stupid dare. It's a stunt that they've pulled multiple times, but on this occasion everything goes wrong, there's a tragic accident and they end up killing 3 people, as you do. Because they're all awful human beings, they flee the scene of the crime, and later, as they're freaking out, arguing amongst themselves and trying to decide what they're gonna do, one of them comes up with a solution. A girl named Megan says that she will step forward and take the blame to make sure that this doesn't destroy all of their lives. There's just one condition: when she is eventually released from prison, the other 5 will owe her a favour. Whatever she wants, no questions asked. The group all attend a prestigious Oxford college, and the story focuses heavily on their upper class privilege and how it's affected them. Each and every one of them is a self-absorbed, entitled, arrogant human being, and to be honest, none of them ever get any better throughout the story. One thing I will say is that the setting is vivid. There's some very detailed descriptions of the landscape and architecture surrounding Oxfordshire. It really does feel like you're right there with the characters. The problem is, in my opinion, that sometimes these descriptions can feel a bit distracting or obnoxious. There's definitely a few occasions where the author uses overly wordy, long-winded metaphors that take so long to get to the point that I either rolled my eyes or felt my attention wandering. 6 characters is quite a large cast, and because of that I don't feel that Bolton had enough time to focus on anyone enough to actually flesh them out. They all just had one character trait. You've got the smart one, the ambitious one, the bully, the coward, the nice-ish one, and the mysterious one. It never really got any deeper than that, and I just never really cared about any of them. There's also the age issue. At the start of the story, they're 18. Megan goes to prison for 20 years, and when she comes out, none of them have developed or matured in that time. It was frustratingly unrealistic that these 38-year-olds with families and big important jobs still acted like spoiled teenagers, and maybe that was the point, but I still found it annoying. I maybe could have forgiven it if they got at least some depth later in the story, but they don't, so it felt less like a character choice and more like a lack of development. I also think that the whole they all owe Megan a favour thing was undercooked and a bit underwhelming in my opinion. I was also left a bit shell-shocked by the ending. The brakes were just slammed on and it was over before I knew it, but I will say that the climax is dramatic for sure. Overall, it was an interesting story and I didn't feel like I wasted my time despite the flaws. However, I do think that somebody who enjoys flowery prose would have a better time with this than I did because I just found it a bit too much. It was just sort of a highbrow literary thriller, and I do think that some people would read it and end up absolutely loving it, a lot more than I did for sure. The Pact is rated NMCOT for not my cup of tea. I did read The Hobbit, but I'm not going to talk about that now because I want to do a separate spoiler discussion. Honestly, I probably could have read more, but I was kept quite busy by recording Dear Mason, and I've also been in the mood for writing, so I've been doing a bit of that each day whilst the inspiration to do so is there. I did finish volume 3 of The Bleeding Ground, which is called A Symphony of Screams, and that'll be coming soon, so keep an eye out. My question for today comes with a scenario. I know, fancy, eh? You're given a book that you know is going to be amazing, the best book you've ever read, but it has to have either a terrible beginning or a terrible ending. Which one do you choose? If you've enjoyed this video, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press them, or I'll hire a flash mob to follow you around and jump out at the most inconvenient moments. If you want to get in touch, say hi and have a chat, you know where the comment section is, and the link to my Twitter can be found in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today guys, until next time take care, for now I'm off, and you should have a good one.